So I still remember the iPhone 13 Pro Max being the absolute king of battery life when it first released. People were getting 10 to 12 hours of screen on time, which was absolutely absurd. And then the 14 Pro Max and the 15 Pro Max came out, and maybe it was software development and maybe things not being as efficient, but the battery life seemed to have taken a small hit overall, even on the Pro Max models, which were the larger ones. So my 15 Pro Max, when I first got it, I was getting about 8 to 9 hours of screen on time, and I thought I should be getting a little bit more. So what I did was I actually went into my settings and cleaned up a bunch of settings that helped me save a bunch of battery life, which translated to about an extra 45 minutes to an hour of screen on time on my iPhone 15 Pro Max, and that's what I want to show you today. We're going to go over 15 features or settings that you should actually turn off or manipulate in order to save as much battery life as possible moving forward, and pick and choose which ones you want because there is a little bit of a sacrifice when it comes to some of these. You know, some of them I like, some of them I don't really like or not willing to actually turn off or on, so keep that in mind, but everything will be in chapters down below. Let's get right into the video. Alright everyone, let's get right into this video. I am using a 15 Pro Max and I want to let you guys know that for reference. If there's a situation or a settings manipulation that doesn't work on a certain iPhone, I will let you know. But I do want to start off in the settings menu and go into accessibility. So in accessibility, you do get a bunch of features that are a little bit more nuanced, and the first one I want to talk about is motion. This is the setting that's going to take the longest to get used to, at least it did for me. And what this does is if you press on this reduce motion, if you actually go out of the application, you can see that the animation is totally gone. So if I show you that again, you can actually see that there is the animation, right? It does show you that animation, opens it up, and if I turn this on, it actually gets rid of that animation totally. So there is kind of like this blur effect or this fade in effect that now replaces whatever animation is going on. And you can customize that a little bit further, but if you turn on reduce motion, it's going to help drastically when it comes to battery life conservation. And then in this same settings menu, number 2 has to be the limit the frame rate. So as I mentioned, I am using a 15 Pro Max, so if you limit the frame rate, the 15 Pro Max and the 15 Pro, as well as I believe everything from the 13 Pro and newer, actually has that 120 Hz ProMotion Retina display. So if you turn off limit frame rate or turn that option on, it actually reduces everything to 60 Hz, which again, if you've never used ProMotion before, then turning this on if you are on the Pro model is probably going to be very beneficial. So you won't get to those 120 frames per second, which would again, was going to drastically help out your battery life. I personally like to keep this turned off because I like the 120 Hz, but I do turn on reduce motion, and you'll see that there is a little bit of a give and take with these settings where you might want to turn some on because you actually don't care for those features, or you want to keep those off because again, you do want to keep those features like this one, for instance, but those are the first two. And then if we stay in here, number 3 has to be the autoplay video preview. So for instance, if you are in the App Store itself, and there is maybe like a video that's playing, it will autoplay that video in the App Store itself. But if you go back into motion and you actually turn that off, it's going to stop it from loading up, whether it is on Wi-Fi or cellular. It's going to stop it from loading up any video previews in any applications. So that will be system-wide. So it's not fetching data or fetching anything to get those videos going. So another thing to turn off if it's something you don't care about. Setting number 4 has to be, of course, turning on dark mode. Now dark mode, I have it turned on and off depending on the time of day, but dark mode, again, it is using an OLED display. So with dark mode, if it is a pitch black color, that means it's turning off that pixel, which means that there's no energy going to that pixel, which ideally will mean you are saving battery. So I like to keep my dark mode dynamic. So during the day, I have this regular brightness, and then at night it does go into dark mode, so it's not in my face as much, but if you want to go dark mode the entire time, it will save you battery life overall. And now the next one, which might be pretty trivial and something that a lot of people will know, make sure that you have your auto lock turned on. I have it on for 5 minutes, but if you want to put it at 30 seconds, that's going to help you out a lot more. Basically, if your phone sits idle, it's going to auto lock itself at these time intervals. By default, I believe it's set to 2 minutes, so keep that in mind. But if you want to keep it on never, that's going to drain a ton of battery and you're going to forget about it. It usually happens with my iPhone 13 mini, but keep it at 30 seconds if you want it to be auto locked as soon as possible if for some reason you're not using your phone. And now for iPhone 14 Pros and newer, so that includes the Pro Max and the 15 Pro and 15 Pro Max, always on display was something that was introduced. Now, a lot of people complained with the iPhone 14, especially when it first came out, that Apple kept showing the wallpaper. So when I would lock it, it would still show the wallpaper, and it was still pretty bright overall. It wasn't like what Google was doing with their always on display. So what you want to do here is actually turn off the show wallpaper and turn off show notifications, which means that you're actually going to black out the display totally. So now you can see that it's totally blacked out. Only the pixels in this little kind of where the clock is and where these widgets are actually turning on. And again, this is a LTPO display, meaning that it is going down to 1 Hertz. And again, even though it isn't always on display, technically if it's in your pocket or face down, and the sensor of the ambient light sensor is sensing that there's in a situation where you don't need the always on display, it will shut off the display completely. So now this next one has to be in general, and then go to background app refresh. Now this is on a per user basis. The first thing I will actually mention is that you want to turn this to Wi-Fi. Now, I'm usually in, I would say 90% of my situation, I'm in Wi-Fi, whether that's at home, in an office, at a coffee shop. It's very rare that I'm just in data mode kind of for extended periods of time. So I like to keep this on Wi-Fi only to save battery life. So when it is refreshing in the background, it's only doing it on Wi-Fi. And we'll talk about the cellular connectivity a little bit later, but then go on here and actually turn off the ones that don't matter to you. So for instance, for Abode, which is my security system at home, I want to keep that turned on. But something for like Airbnb or Amazon or AMC Theaters, I don't need the app to be refreshing in the background constantly because I don't really care about the information it's fetching when I'm not using that application. So go through these. It might take a little bit of time, but go through these and turn them off whenever you see fit, and it will save you some battery. And now this is a great segue to talk about cellular settings. So go into cellular, then tap on your primary phone number, and then go down to where it says voice and data. As you can see, I actually keep my voice and data at LTE at all times. I don't use 5G auto and I don't have 5G on, and I've been doing this since I believe the iPhone 13 Pro Max when 5G was first introduced because I didn't really care for it. And 5G, first off, isn't as prevalent as 4G LTE, and maybe you get an extra 10% boost in actual data speeds overall, which is something that I don't really notice, especially in my locations, even in very populated locations like New York City and things like that. But for the most part, especially on road trips and things, 4G is more than enough compared to 5G, and 5G takes up a lot more battery and a lot more energy than LTE does. So I keep on LTE because, like I mentioned, 90% of the time I'm on Wi-Fi, and for that 10% of the time that I'm not on Wi-Fi, I'll just use LTE because that's fast enough to load up a YouTube video, to download an application. I am actually yet to get one of those 1 gigabyte kind of download speeds out of a 5G tower because I'm nowhere near those towers. Now these next two have to do with the haptics. Now Apple is known and iPhones are known for having kind of industry-leading haptics feedback, so when you type in your keyboard you kind of feel a physical click. So if you go into your sound and haptics, you can actually scroll down to where it says keyboard feedback and you can turn off haptics. Now, I personally keep the haptics on because I like that kind of feedback that I'm getting from the keyboard itself, so I know that I'm actually pressing on a button even though it's just a touchscreen, but some people don't really care for it and that saves you a lot of battery because think about it. Every single time you touch on a key and type a key on an iMessage or a note, you're going to get a little bit of a buzz or a feedback, which means that's using up energy inside of the phone to actually activate that motor. And then you can go even further, so if I scroll all the way down to where it says keyboard feedback, lock sound, and then system haptics, you can turn off system haptics, so whenever there is a haptic kind of feedback in any situation, it can be turned off, which again reduces the amount of motor being used and will save battery at the end of the day. And all these little features and setting manipulations that I keep talking about holistically will end up saving about 45 to maybe an hour of screen on time overall. And now let's get into one of the biggest battery drainers in my opinion, which is location services. So scroll down to where it says privacy and security, tap up here to where it says location services. Now this is going to be on an individual basis. First off, this share my location situation, go into here and make sure that you aren't sharing location, or if you are, make sure that you are sharing it to the right people, because with every single person that you share your location with, it's going to actually fetch that data in real time. So whenever they check your location, your phone has to do work to actually share that location with that person. So if you are okay with not sharing your location, I'm aware that some people like to do that. I am one of those people, but if you want to turn that completely off, that's going to save you a lot of battery in terms of location services in real time. And then you're going to want to do the same thing that we did with the background app refresh, but this time for location services. Now, there's some applications where location services is a must, especially when you have it always turned on. Again, my security system, I like it to know where I am at all times. So if I'm away from home, then it's going to know to actually set it on and turn it on and make sure that it knows that I'm not there. But there's some other applications in here that you don't need that, right? So for instance, maybe my Credit Karma account, I don't really need it to be always on, or any of these applications. And you can see that I've gone in here and I've actually changed some of these a lot because I don't want some random application like, let's say, Hotels Tonight to know where I am at all times, because it just doesn't make sense and it doesn't make my app experience any better. So go through this, make sure you have the ones that are always on versus only while using versus completely turned off, and make sure that it works for you, because the more that you turn it off, the more your battery is going to last. And then if you really want to deep dive, you can go into System Services, which is at the bottom of that Location Services. And the setting that I want to show off is the significant locations. So if you go in here, it's going to Face ID. And basically what this does is that it's tracking you at all times. So if you go to a location multiple times, like for instance, it's showing my home right here, it's showing the office, it's showing different places. It basically tells you how many records it has of me being in a certain location. So over time, it's going to learn like, hey, that to me is a significant location and I'm there a lot of the time. So to each their own, if you want that to happen, if you want that to be turned on. I don't really know what the purpose of it is totally, and I could see this being kind of a detriment if somebody gets into your phone and is able to get into your settings. They'll know exactly where you are most of the time, but that's to each their own. And then if you do want to go in here and turn some of these off, they will kind of add up to being able to save you a little bit of battery. I keep them on for the most part because I don't like to mess with my system services, but you can if you really want to. And now lastly, what kind of battery saving video would this be if we don't actually go into the battery settings and show off exactly what we got going on? So I'm a big proponent of low power mode. I turn on low power mode when I am under 20%. It does make it last. Or if I know that I'm going to be out for a very long time, I will turn on low power mode. But I do want to show off my battery health and charging. So again, I'm at 100% battery health because I am using a pretty much brand new 15 Pro Max. And then when it comes to charging optimization, I like to keep it optimized charging. There is that 80% limit, which is if you are maybe an EV owner, you are aware of this, that most people or most EV companies recommend that you only go up to 80% when charging and only go up to 100% when you know you're going to have a long road trip. Same idea goes here, right? You want to stay between 10 and 80% of battery, and that's what your hardcore use is. And if you want to, maybe if you know you're going to be out of the house for 12 hours, then maybe go to 100%. But this will help more in terms of long-term battery health as opposed to day-to-day battery health. So something to keep in mind. And then clean energy charging is exactly what it sounds like. It's put on there because depending on what your region is, there are certain times of day where it's a little bit cheaper for energy, where it's a little bit more clean to actually consume energy. So basically when you're plugged in at night, it'll actually pick up the best time to actually fully charge your battery, and that's what clean energy charging is. And if we go real quick, I want to show you my battery life overall. So on average, I'm getting about 9 hours of screen on time and almost 2 hours of screen off time. And if I go on a day right here like Tuesday, I have 9 hours of screen on time, 9 hours and 15 on 100% battery. Another day like this one right here, I actually use 100% battery and I got 14 hours of screen on time, which was absolutely amazing. So YouTube took up a lot of it, Pokemon trading card, home and lock screen. So you can see that we are improving the battery life overall on some of those days. But that is everything that I have for you guys. Let's finish up this video and get out of here. So that's just about going to do it for this video, everybody. Leave a comment down below if you're going to actually end up using any of these setting changes or setting manipulations to save some battery life, because as a personal anecdotal use case, it has increased my battery life overall on my 15 Pro Max. And it will probably help out even more on something like the 15 Plus, which I think is the current battery champ in the iPhone lineup. But like I said, leave a comment down below of your favorite one. The one that took the longest to get used to was that reduced motion, turning that off, because I was so used to the animations, but after about a day or so, you completely forget about it, and then it's just business as usual, but with better battery life overall. But as I mentioned, that's going to do it. If you guys want to watch more iOS, iPadOS, or macOS content, click on one of these videos right here. Stay tuned. We should have some M3, M3 Pro, and M3 Max MacBook Pro content coming here real soon. But until next time, I'm Fernando, and I'm out of here, everybody. Peace.